Welcome to the Ukraine Accountability Conference in The Hague, the city of peace and justice. We are coming together to meet the legitimate demands of people who suffer war crimes and gross violations of human rights. Our goal is to work with common purpose and coherence of action in bringing those responsible for international crimes to justice. The Dutch government, together with the International Criminal Court and the European Commission, are looking forward to your contribution and to using this moment to accelerate our collective work towards accountability. Now, please welcome Ukrainian Dutch singer Katie Kos.
Hearts will break and dreams will fade, but pain will heal and times will change. We'll all be lost before we find the things that truly change our lives. So I'll move on while you decide to come along or change your mind. I'll move on with my broken heart and my faded dreams, but I won't start all over, 'cause pain will heal and times will change, so this will never feel the same again. If I move on, if I move on, so I'll move on. I'll move on.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is great to see all of you here today. And a special welcome to Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, who is joining us by video link, as is President Zelensky later today. The road to justice starts with the will not just to go forward, but to do so together. And with that in mind, I would like to thank our partners in hosting this conference, the International Criminal Court and the European Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, the remnants of a shelled house in the middle of a residential area of Borodyanka. Nearby, 6 makeshift graves were found. One of them was smaller than the others, not much larger than the size of a baby. These are bare facts, stripped of emotion. Yet we cannot separate them from a powerful shared conviction. The forensic pathologist Bella Kubat, who takes part in the examination of the 6 bodies, described it as a kind of higher ethical standard that we as humanity have agreed upon. That we do not do this. That we do not attack civilians. That we do not drop bombs on them, and that if you decide to do so, you will be held accountable. It is this standard, this shared conviction, that has enormous power. It took Bela Kuba to Ukraine, and it brought all of us to The Hague here today. The ICC's forensic investigation team, which Bela was part of, supported local authorities in their investigation of potential war crimes. And in many ways, that mission was unique. Never before did the ICC send a team of this magnitude. Never before did such an investigation take place so soon. And never before we so intensively. Detachment Commander Kim Moerman, who led the team, believes this mission can be a blueprint for the future. But he also feels that something more is needed. An overarching strategy to establish the truth and ensure justice. And I couldn't agree more. Just like a climate strategy and a COVID strategy, we need an accountability strategy. A strategy driven by the universal belief that all of us are protected by law. Ensuring that all roads lead to justice, now and in the future. And the good news is we are making progress. The mandate of Eurojust has been reinforced, allowing it to collect and preserve evidence of war crimes. And the ICC is participating in a joint investigation team for the first time. And we are very grateful for all the contributions that participating countries have made. Yet more is needed. And so today, we are making an urgent appeal to all of you. Not only to act swiftly, but above all, to persevere. The Netherlands is donating an additional €1 million to the ICC. We've also pledged €1 million to support the UN Human Rights Office in Ukraine. And we are pledging €1 million for psychological support for victims of sexual violence. We're stepping up our cooperation with the ICC, and we will support the Ukrainian Prosecutor-General at this difficult time. Ladies and gentlemen, humanity's history has been a long sequence of war upon war. A history of impunity and suffering. But there's also been a growing determination to fight impunity. Not only because we owe it to today's victims, but also because we want to prevent future crimes. And because the road to justice helps societies across the globe to learn from grave missteps. It was in 1899 when the world came together for the Hague Peace Conference. The first call for the adjudication of war crimes was heard. And so much progress has been made since then. Aggression has become an international crime. And we've established a permanent international court that can hold individuals accountable. So in our fight against impunity, we have all the tools that we need at hand. And our next goal is to join forces in a unified approach. Thank you very much for being here, and I wish you all a successful conference. Thank you. I would now like to give the floor to Karim Khan, the prosecutor of the ICC. Karim, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, really it's a great honour to be able to say a few words to you at the opening of this session, and really my debt of gratitude to the Foreign Minister, Foreign Minister Hoekstra, and also Commissioner Reynders is really unlimited. I think it really is a wonderful opportunity for us to co-host this event. The fact that out of your busy schedules you're here speaks actually much more eloquently and convincingly to the dire moment we're in. The simple truth is that we're living in very uncertain times, that as we speak, children, women and men, the young and the old, are living in terror. They're suffering in Ukraine and in so many different parts of the world, grieving about what they lost yesterday, holding their breath about what they could lose today and what tomorrow can bring. At a time like this, the law cannot be a spectator. The law cannot recline in comfort in The Hague or anywhere else for that matter, when it's meant to protect and uphold certain principles that are essential for humanity. This is what we're trying to do. This is why you are all here. And everybody has a part to play. Yesterday there was an event that the Foreign Minister and myself attended, members of our office, with civil society. Civil society is represented here today. States are represented here. We have a message in a moment from the High Commissioner for Human Rights. We have the SRSG under Secretary-General Pramila Patten. We have other USGs for genocide and children in armed conflict that are speaking and making statements. We need to really work together, respecting the independence of different mandates, but cooperating and communicating in as effective a way as possible. As the Foreign Minister said, I think there is hope. There is hope because whilst we see the devastation of the pictures that were on our screens a moment ago, not just the physical loss, but really the devastations of people's hopes and their futures, we have brought into very stark relief, you have brought into very stark relief, that we need to have a reawakening. This is a moment to have a growth spurt of international law. For far too long, one of the maladies that have afflicted us is viewing the law as something that can be taken when we want it and ignore it when it's inconvenient. This moment of clinging to the law and applying the law in a practical way as an anchor for stability and security is one that is the requirement of the hour. So action is happening. For the first time in the life of the ICC, 43 states, a third of all state parties, referred the Ukraine situation to my office. The day after the investigation was commenced on the 2nd of March, I deployed a team to the region. We have a continuous field presence. We have a duty station now in Kyiv that we're about to open. We've used innovation with the wonderful support of the EU Commission and the redoubtable President Ladislav Hamran of Eurojust. For the first time, as the Foreign Minister said, the ICC OTP is part of a joint investigation team. Innovation, that the French deployed a forensics team, a new partnership with the Dutch that I do hope can be a blueprint, are being used. Today we're announcing guidebooks that we have co-written with Eurojust for NGOs, for civil society, and also another one for national authorities to try to make sure that we don't over-document, to try to make sure the evidence that is collected can actually have a purpose, not to gather dust on shelves for historical interest, but actually to uphold the rights of individuals and their right to be protected from genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. For me, this conference represents a need. It addresses a need of coordination, of coherence, as the Foreign Minister said, the need of an overarching strategy. We need to learn the lessons of the past. When I made this announcement, when I made the declaration on the 25th of February, I was in Cox's Bazar. And we saw there the cost of over-documentation. We've seen in Iraq and Syria the need of the Murad Code. We need to realize this is not about fiefdoms. It's not about different entities struggling and competing and rubbing against each other. It really is about a need to make sure the law can fulfill its purpose across the needs of Ukraine, and to use it as an important platform for many other situations. Because really, for goodness sake, if at this moment we don't realize the law has a role to play, yes, of course, not in isolation, together with other measures. We see in different parts of the world, we saw in the Balkans, we see in many other situations the need for diplomatic focus, political action, economic actions. But the law cannot be idle and it cannot be disregarded or relegated to a secondary position. If we do that, I think we have a chance to have a second wind, so to speak, a second sprint where the law has an ever more important, an ever a greater role to play in the lives of individuals. But it needs you. It needs your capitals, it needs your leadership, it needs your leadership to make sure that we don't lose focus with the economic maladies that are being confronted by many countries with the different demands that the economies face, we need to make sure in Ukraine and in many other situations, the lives of those that look up to you, that count upon us, are vindicated by concrete action. And if we do that, I think the purpose of today will be time very well spent indeed. Thank you.
Karim, thank you so much. I would now like to give the floor to European Commissioner Didier Reynders. Didier, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Wopke. Ladies and gentlemen, the losses suffered by the Ukrainian people can be counted in the millions of homes destroyed by Russian bombs. They can be counted by the billions of dollars or euros needed to reconstruct the villages, towns and cities lost to this war. The Ukraine Recovery Conference brought partners together to discuss this earlier this month. But for the victims of war crimes, what they have lost cannot be counted like this. You cannot put a price on the loss of life, the loss of a family member, or the loss of a person's dignity. In March, the President of the Commission, the European Commission, tasked me with setting up a task force to coordinate EU efforts on sanctions enforcement, the Freeze and Seize Task Force. As Commissioner for Justice, I'm also responsible for coordinating all efforts to bring war criminals to justice. It is only with justice that we can help victims and their families. This is a gigantic task, not least because it requires the collection and storage of evidence in the midst of a war. It requires a strong, stable Ukrainian justice system, and it requires your support. But this is why we are here today, so I want to thank the ICC, the Dutch government, and you for being here. The link between accountability and peace is unbreakable. Accountability for war crimes is a part of a country's healing and reconstruction. Without this, it is impossible to move forward. We witnessed this 28 years ago when more than 800,000 people were systematically murdered in Rwanda. And we have since witnessed atrocities in Darfur, in Syria, and in Congo, for example, or in the Western Balkans. Almost 3 decades after the Rwandan genocide, despite many successful convictions, there are still suspects at large. But for every single crime, accountability is crucial. And as part of a country's healing, it is the country itself that must be in the driving seat. Almost immediately after the war broke out, Ukraine took many measures to step up its judicial response, including a web page where Ukrainian citizens could immediately report war crimes committed by Russian forces. This has encouraged Ukrainian victims, citizens and civil society organizations to report evidence and vital information. This must continue. For Ukraine's international partners, it is important to understand that the support we provide must be coordinated, but also complement the work that Ukraine is already doing to ensure accountability. With regard to the collection of evidence, I want to commend the courageous work of Prosecutor-General Irina Venediktova and her team. They are traveling to areas in which armed activities are still ongoing to document war crimes and collect evidence. As I mentioned, civil society is also very helpful here. NGOs in Ukraine have crucial experience in documenting war crimes and crimes against humanity. I want to underline that this must be done in a way which allows it to be used as evidence before a court. It is equally important that the collection of evidence does not traumatize victims further. You will be discussing this later today. In collecting and storing evidence, Ukraine has the EU's unwavering support. This is why the European Union managed to extend the mandate of Eurojust to help store evidence. Ukraine, the ICC, the EU's member states and potentially third countries can draw from this stored evidence. I call on you to add to it and make use of it. In addition to collecting evidence, achieving accountability requires coordination. This means coordination amongst actors, but also coordination in terms of jurisdiction. Today, there are more than 20,000 investigations open on war crimes in Ukraine. 14 EU member states are investigating crimes, as well as the International Criminal Court, which has complementary jurisdiction. At the end of March, Lithuania, Poland and Ukraine set up a joint investigation team with the support of Eurojust. The Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC has since joined together with Estonia, Latvia and Slovakia. We hope that Europol will also join this joint investigation team, and we are working together with the US with an arrangement between Eurojust and the US for the good collaboration in the joint investigation team. I'm happy that in the midst of the tragedy, the EU could offer Ukraine the hope of becoming a member one day. It was extremely powerful to see the EU flag carried into the Ukrainian parliament. This is also a reason why the EU continues to encourage Ukraine to make the necessary judicial reforms, including the ratification of the Rome Statute. The European Commission and its rule of law experts are here to help Ukraine uphold the rule of law and protect its strong justice system that can stand on its own 2 feet. Equally, the European Commission is committed to ensuring that all individuals responsible for war crimes stand trial and are brought to justice. There are different actors that can help us achieve this. This will involve the ICC, but also the national courts of member states acting under active or universal jurisdiction. To conclude, accountability requires the collection of evidence and coordination. Together with a strong Ukrainian justice system, a strong ICC, and strong national courts, these are crucial elements to moving forward. With every step we take, it is important that justice remains at the forefront of our minds. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this today. And again, coordination, it's an important word because we have to work not only for the next months, the next years, but maybe the next decades. And we will continue to do that to bring all the perpetrators of atrocities in Ukraine to justice. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Didier. I would now like to give the floor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, our dear friend and colleague, Dimitro Kuleba. Dimitro, the floor is yours.
Dear Wopke, dear Ministers, Excellencies, I regret I was not able to join you today because of my leg and health condition, but I'm really honored and appreciative of the invitation to address you. And I would like to thank you, Wopke, in particular, for bringing together all respective representatives of countries and international institutions which do care for bringing Russia to accountability. I would also like to thank Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court and the European Commission for co-organizing this conference. This is a clear demonstration of solidarity and commitment. At the outset, I want to state it crystal clear. Ukraine accuses Russia of committing a crime of aggression. Together with other nations, organizations, and institutions, we will use every available tool to seek justice for thousands of innocent victims of this crime, and we will not rest until perpetrators are held to account. We appreciate the role played by the International Criminal Court, and we see that it handles the issue with energy and commitment. But if there are no appropriate instruments which allow us to deliver justice specifically with regard to the crime of aggression, we are committed to going back to the very roots of international criminal justice to create appropriate mechanisms. And therefore, I call on all nations to back our just and legitimate quest for justice and accountability. Otherwise, if perpetrators get away with this crime, we will have to live in a dark, dark world. The war of aggression Russia is waging against Ukraine is the largest and most brutal war of aggression in Europe since 1945. It has been committed in overt defiance of the foundational principles of international law. The legal response to it shall be appropriate and resemble the response which the international community found to bring perpetrators to responsibility after World War II. As provided for in the judgment of the International Military Tribunal in Nuremberg, to initiate a war of aggression is not only an international crime, it is the supreme international crime, differing from other war crimes only in that it contains within itself the accumulated evil of the whole. Let us not forget that committing the crime of aggression is the basis for commission of other crimes under international law, in particular crimes against humanity and war crimes, which will be investigated and prosecuted by the International Criminal Court in the most capable way. Unfortunately, there is currently no international court or tribunal that could effectively try Russia's top political and military leadership for committing the crime of aggression against Ukraine. International justice provides appropriate mechanisms to address war crimes and crimes against humanity committed during Russia's war. They are currently being investigated by Ukraine, and I'm proud that Prosecutor-General of Ukraine is focused on creating the legal basis for prosecution of these crimes. A number of other states and the International Criminal Court. The referral of the situation in Ukraine by 43 states and Ukraine's previously given consent to the ICC jurisdiction over all crimes committed during the armed conflict since 2014 enables the work of the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC. Ukraine remains strongly committed to cooperating with him in his efforts. At the same time, the ICC faces objective difficulties in gaining jurisdiction over the specific crime of aggression against Ukraine for a number of legal reasons. Unfortunately, these difficulties appear to be unsurmountable for the ICC. I believe that there has never been a more appropriate time to fill in this glaring gap in the architecture of international criminal justice. This is why Ukraine calls on the establishment of a special tribunal which would have a specific jurisdiction over the crime of aggression against Ukraine. We have heard a number of reservations since the idea first floated in the early March. Most of them express concern that this effort could replace existing international courts and tribunals, thus weakening them. I want to clearly reiterate, we do not have any such intention, and this will not be the outcome of our effort. In fact, we have always been working closely with all international courts and tribunals, and in particular, the ICC. Ukraine as a state has always been and remains deeply committed to international law. We wish the existing institution to be as strong, as sound as possible. All we want is the crime of aggression committed by Russia against Ukraine to not remain unpunished. A number of international organizations and national legislators have already adopted resolutions supporting the establishment of the special tribunal. Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, European Parliament, NATO Parliamentary Assembly, OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania. The Ukrainian Parliament addressed the European Union on June 19th, calling for EU leadership on the matter. We envisage that the special tribunal should be based on rules and approaches applied by the International Criminal Court and set out in its Rome Statute. The special tribunal will investigate and prosecute for the crime of aggression against Ukraine, committed on the territory of Ukraine, as defined in Article 8 bis of the Rome Statute of the ICC. The temporary jurisdiction of the special tribunal shall cover all events since February 2014, the beginning of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine. The special tribunal shall have jurisdiction over natural persons in a position effectively to exercise control over or to direct the political or military action of a state. The official position of a defendant, whether as head of state or other official of a state, shall not free them from individual criminal responsibility or mitigate punishment. The special tribunal will deal only with the crime of aggression against Ukraine and will be set as an international ad hoc criminal tribunal to address the Russian war of aggression against my country. We call on our international partners to consider entering into agreement on establishment of the Special Tribunal for the punishment of the crime of aggression against Ukraine. Dear colleagues, I encourage all of you to look into this initiative and proceed with implementation of the initiative without delay. We owe justice to thousands of innocent victims of this unseen crime. We owe justice to the international community as a whole in order to address the most brutal attack on international law since the end of the World War II. We must fight impunity now together to leave to the next generation a world where international rule of law will always prevail. I thank you very much, and dear Wopke, I would like to once again thank you for organizing this conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dimitro. We will now see a video message by the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Joseph Borrell.
Ministers, Chief Prosecutor, Commissioner, Excellencies, Russia's unprovoked and unjustified military aggression against Ukraine is not only an attack on Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity, but a violation of international law, the United Nations Charter and the international rules-based order. A violation of international humanitarian law with deliberated attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure. I have visited Ukraine and I have witnessed firsthand the devastating consequences of the Russian military aggression, the destruction, the death and the injuries. As ever, civilians bear the worst consequences of the conflict. But let me be very clear. Perpetrators of these unspeakable crimes must and will be held accountable, whoever they are. Russia's actions have severe repercussions, not just for Europe, but for the rest of the world. From Asia to Latin America to Africa, this is not a European war. This is not a Western war. Russia's action deliberately increases the risk of global food insecurity and disrupts international trade. The number of victims, of those whose human rights have been violated, is rising, and as the cases of conflict-related sexual violence. The European Union has been at the forefront of supporting initiatives on accountability, including the investigation by the International Criminal Court, national investigation by Ukraine, and investigation by the European Union member states. Today's meeting is a good opportunity to explore how we can further enhance our cooperation, to share the burden by using our resources efficiently, identifying concrete needs, filling gaps, and avoiding duplications. The perpetrators of the most serious international crimes must be brought to justice and held to account, in Ukraine and everywhere in the world. We owe it to the victims. Impunity is not an option. This gives full importance and value to this meeting.
I would now like to give the floor to Madam Hoekstra, Under-Secretary for Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights of the United States of America, who will address us on behalf of Secretary Blinken. Dear Hoekstra, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll now read a statement on behalf of U.S. Secretary of State Antony J. Blinken. Thank you to the Netherlands, the European Union, and the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court for convening this conference. As this meeting takes place, Russian forces continue to commit atrocities in Ukraine with harrowing intensity, as they've done since further invading their sovereign neighbor on February 24th. With each day, the war crimes mount. Rape, torture, extrajudicial executions, disappearances, forced deportations. Attacks on schools, hospitals, playgrounds, apartment buildings, grain silos, water and gas facilities. These are not the acts of rogue units. They fit a clear pattern across every part of Ukraine touched by Russia's forces. And they fit a clear pattern with Russia's previous actions in conflicts in Chechnya, Georgia, Syria, and Ukraine starting in 2014. Every one of these attacks has its victims. Like the 47 people killed, including a 9-year-old boy in a Russian strike on an apartment complex in Chasiv Yar last weekend. That number will likely rise as first responders continue to dig through the rubble. This is just one of more than 20 attacks in one day in one region of Ukraine. Every atrocity sends out waves of suffering that most of us cannot comprehend, inflicting wounds on victims and their loved ones that may never fully heal. It's our responsibility to hold the perpetrators accountable and deliver justice and support for the growing number of victims. We can support Ukraine's Office of the Prosecutor-General in its efforts to hold accountable perpetrators in the country's justice system and to coordinate with international inquiries, as the United States, the European Union, and the United Kingdom are doing through the Atrocity Crimes Prevention and Advisory Group. We can support national courts when they establish jurisdiction over individuals accused of committing international crimes in Ukraine and against Ukrainians deported to Russia. We can support international and multilateral efforts to collect and examine the mounting evidence of atrocities in Ukraine, including those by the International Criminal Court. We can undertake our own efforts to gather evidence of war crimes and make it available to national and international investigations, as we are doing through the Conflict Observatory. We can support the work of civil society groups, documenting abuses and providing support to survivors. And we can better integrate their findings into investigations. We can provide survivors with access to medical care, psychosocial services, and other vital assistance. And when we gather evidence from these individuals, we can ensure we engage in a way that is survivor-centered and trauma-informed, so that we don't exacerbate their suffering. Countries in every part of the world are already supporting many of these efforts, which is a testament to our global unity in standing with victims in Ukraine. But this attention makes our coordination crucial. The same goes for justice efforts worldwide. Since February 24th, I've spoken with human rights defenders from around the globe, and they've consistently offered 2 warnings about this crisis. First, allowing grave abuses in Ukraine to go unpunished will not only embolden the Kremlin, but brutal regimes everywhere. And second, the international community must bring greater attention and resources to bear on other parts of the world where atrocities are being committed with impunity. They are right. We don't have to choose between focusing on justice in Ukraine and other crises. Everything we're doing to lay the foundation for accountability in Ukraine, we can and must do wherever atrocities are being committed. All victims of grave international crimes deserve equal access to justice, regardless of where they take place and who perpetrates them. So let us use the clarity and unity of this moment to broaden our ambition, knowing that the steps we take toward justice anywhere will advance the fight against impunity everywhere. For the history of the pursuit of justice teaches us that these efforts can take years or even decades. Just ask some of the countries represented here, like Colombia, Ireland, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Or ask the victims of the Assad regime's Branch 251, where thousands of civilians were tortured at the outset of Syria's civil war. From 2011 to 2012, that facility was overseen by Syrian Colonel Anwar Raslan. He was detained in Germany in 2019 and later tried in a German court. In January 2022, Raslan was convicted of crimes against humanity and sentenced to life in prison. A single conviction may seem small alongside the atrocities committed in Syria, but in the words of one survivor who testified in Raslan's trial, it is the beginning of a path. We owe it to victims everywhere, and those vulnerable to such atrocities to work relentlessly to stop these crimes. And we owe it to them to stay on the long path to justice, so that when perpetrators are eventually forced to stand for their crimes, and that day will come, the case against them will be unimpeachable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Azra, we now see a video message by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet.
Excellencies, distinguished participant, this conference in the City of Peace and Justice comes at a critical moment, almost 5 months into a conflict of destruction unseen in Europe for decades, and with ramifications for countries and people worldwide that are worsening by the day. From its outset, I have insisted, as in conflict wherever they may arise, on the vital importance of accountability for violations of international law, for violations of international human rights and humanitarian law, and for violations of international criminal law, all wherever and by whomever committed. In that, the human rights of victims and their families to truth, justice, and reparation are our fundamental baselines. My office, through its Human Rights Monitoring Mission, has been monitoring and reporting on the situation in Ukraine for over 8 years. And since 24 February, the mission has been verifying allegations of gross violation of international human rights law and serious violations of international humanitarian law in the context of the Russian Federation's armed attack on Ukraine. The number of these allegations and their gravity are appalling, and a great many concern violations, including conflict-related sexual violence that may amount to war crimes. Our mission will continue its essential work of documenting, monitoring, and reporting. The UN Human Rights Council also quickly took an important step in establishing an eminent commission of inquiry to conduct investigative work into the situation, a process with which my office is also fully engaged by way of support. Excellencies, justice, we know, is best served at the national level, consistent with international due process and fair trial standards. The national justice system of Ukraine has already taken important steps of investigation and trial, which we are monitoring. Given the breadth of the challenges it is facing, it is crucial that the international community continues to support increased capacity for Ukraine's investigations into alleged war crimes committed on its territory, whatever the circumstances. In that, I acknowledge the efforts to date led by the Prosecutor-General of Ukraine. The appropriate collection and preservation of evidence, including forensic evidence, which can in turn be utilized in legal proceedings, is key to ensuring accountability. And I urge this conference to marshal further support for Ukraine's authorities in this area. The International Criminal Court, for its part, sees within its jurisdiction with formal investigation, while beyond that, a multiplicity of other actors of international and regional level, as well as non-state actors, have been engaged, both individually and in various combinations, on different aspects. We know from unfortunate experience the risk of overlap and inefficiency, as well as re-victimization and re-traumatization of victims and families that can result from cross-cutting and duplicative efforts, however well-intentioned. Such outcomes can and must be avoided. In addition, programs for supporting accountability should consistently be founded on a victim-centered approach, framed by the rights, needs, and interests of victims, along with access to necessary rehabilitation and support services. As I have previously emphasized, effective coordination between these efforts within respective mandates and under applicable legal frameworks is key to ensuring both best complementarity and focused use of limited resources. This conference offers an important platform to move towards translating these shared principles into operational realities that work on the ground. In conclusion, I recall the binding order of the International Court of Justice, also delivered in this city on the 16th of March 2022, for the Russian Federation to suspend the military operation that had commenced in February 2022 in the territory of Ukraine. Compliance with that ruling continues to be essential to bring to an end the violence of arms we continue to witness daily and the recurring violations and abuses in its wake. To ensure accountability and consistent with its own obligations, the Russian Federation must also investigate, prosecute, and punish members of armed forces found to have committed violations of international humanitarian law. I thank you for your attention.